Wow, I'm so excited to start this series. If this is your first Sunday, welcome to New Hope Calvary Chapel. I'm Pastor David. We are starting a brand new series this week in the book of Joshua. This is the largest book we've ever been through as a congregation. It's 24 chapters, and I believe we're going to get through this in 8 weeks, so we are going to strive really hard. But I want to say this before we start. I'm asking each of you, stick with us through this series. Stick with us through the series. Come every single week. I'm telling you, God has something for you through this. As the video was mentioning, the series is called From Wanderers to Conquerors. And I believe that sometimes in our life, we're just wandering. We're wandering in so many different areas in our life. And I believe God's going to speak through us through this book to conquer those areas that we're wandering in. To conquer, whether that's giving it over to the Lord or just getting wisdom from the Lord of how to conquer those things. Because here's the reality. We're all wandering in certain areas, right? There's some things in our life where we just don't have a hold of. There's some things in our life where we're just like, I'm not sure what to do with this. Or I feel like I'm in a desert in this area or a wilderness, whatever you want to call it. And so what I'm saying is, I'm declaring this for the next 8 weeks. We will conquer those things for the glory of God. And so what we get to see in this book is an amazing story of Israel going from wandering to conquering. And so I want us to be focused on this. I want us to be here every single week looking at what's taking place here, because this book is all about just that, going from wandering in areas to conquering. As we see Israel, who struggled with this, dealing with this for 40 years. We'll learn a little bit more as we dive in. But again, this is all about how to live a victorious Christian life. So maybe you've been in an area where you've just been struggling. How do I be victorious? How do I win these battles? This book is for you. Truly is. This book is specifically for you on how to live a victorious Christian life, because we're going to see many things unfold over the next 8 weeks. One thing we're going to see is a lot of war, tons of war. Who could say in their life, like, yeah, I deal with some war in my life, right? Some struggles, there's some difficulties, there's some times where I'm like, I feel like I'm in a battle, and this is really, really hard. We're going to see that. We're going to see chaos. We're going to see wandering. But let me tell you this, God is our strength, and with him we can conquer anything. And so that's the point of this, is that truly we can conquer anything as long as we are connected with the Lord, growing in the Lord, and handing everything over to him. So really quick, a background before we dive in. Who is Joshua? Joshua, his original name is Hoshea. It means salvation or deliverer. Joshua is from the tribe of Ephraim, the son of Nun. I love that name, Nun. He was born into slavery in Egypt. So if you've been around church for a while, you understand the story of Moses, right? As Moses enters into Egypt, he's claiming to Pharaoh, hey, I want you to let my people go, and we need to get out of here. Well, Joshua was a part of that. He was a part of the slavery in Egypt. He was born into that. And when Moses led them out, Joshua was a part of that as well. So Josh got to see quite a bit of things that were taking place. He later on becomes a leader in Israel's army. He defeats the Amalekites. That's really the first recorded act that we see of his life. Then he becomes Moses' servant. And what that means is he was the official servant to the leader of Israel. As Moses led them out of Egypt, Joshua becomes his second right-hand man. And this is a big deal. This is a huge deal. Because I'm assuming at times Joshua's like, you know what, God, what do you have for my life? You know, what am I supposed to do here? And so he grows with Moses, becoming his main man, and we see what's going to take place in his life as we dive into this book. So he served well, but he also led well. Moses, in Numbers, what he did was he asked 12 spies to go spy out the land of Canaan. And this is the land that God promised the Israelites long ago. And he said, hey, I want you to go check out the land and spy it out. So if you've heard this story, what happens is these 12 spies come back, right? And they give a report. And this is what 10 of them say. There's giants in the land, so there's no way that we can take this. And what's so interesting about that text is this. How many of you feel like there's giants in your life and you feel at times, I can't take this? Can we be honest this morning? Any hands? Any giants in your life where you're just like, this is too big, I can't take this on, right? But the reality is there's two people that reported back in that same report, and one of them was Joshua and the other one was Caleb, and this is what they said. We can take it. We can take them. Let's go take our land that God promised us. But instead, the people of Israel decided to believe the 10 and not move forward. And therefore, what we see in their life is they were wandering for 40 years outside of the promised land that God had given them. What they didn't do is they didn't cling to the promises that God had. Instead, they saw giants, and so therefore they saw all these problems, and they're like, we can't defeat these things. But in reality, guess what? God's bigger than any problem in your life. Any problem in your life, he's bigger than it. And so the reality is like we need to make sure we cling to those things because that's the truth. And if we cling to those things, we believe, again, that God is bigger than any opponent or any problem in our life. And so we will be able to take steps forward in our relationship with him. Moses' story starts in Exodus 2 and ends in Deuteronomy chapter 34. It's 4 books long. There's a lot that goes on in his life. And Joshua being with him for a good amount of that time. And so what we see is after Deuteronomy, Moses dies. You'll hear that right away in this book. And now this book is about Joshua becoming the leader of Israel after Moses and taking them to the promised land. And so what an amazing accomplishment, right? As you have this leader, Joshua, who now God declares, you are the one in charge and you're going to lead these people into the land that I promised them long ago. And so what an exciting thing, but how about this? Sometimes that could be fearful, right? There's fear that steps in. You're like, God, you want me to do what? You want me to take these people. And let me tell you, there's a lot of people in Israel. When we think about these people all entering into the promised land, it's not just a couple thousand. We're talking a lot of people. And the funny thing is, because of their sin and not entering into the promised land, for 40 years, they were just sitting and wandering. And each day, many lives were lost. As the next generation was coming up, many of the generation was dying off, right, as they got older and older and older. And I was looking at the study of just the amount of people, and some scholars believe that there was about 84 to 86 people that died daily while they were wandering. That's millions. It's crazy to think about. But because of their lack of obedience, they didn't get to enter into what God has promised them and given them. How many times is that us? We're not entering into what God has promised us because of fear, because of anxiety, because we feel like the enemy's telling us there's no way that this can happen. But we got to fight against that and realize he's our conqueror. We can conquer those things through his strength and through his glory. And so again, Joshua being the big part of this whole entire story in this book. Israel will go from wandering to conquering, and that's exactly what I want us to do, is the same exact thing. That you would write down something even today. Maybe you're wandering in an area. Write it down and ask the Lord, Lord, help me in this area to conquer these things in my life. That I be able to be free of these things, that I be able to enter into the promises that you've given me. That's the point of this, and I want us to grow in an amazing way as we walk through this book of Joshua. The only way that this can happen is if we have faith, if we have trust, and if we are obedient to what God says. That's the only way it can happen. So I hope that you guys are excited because I believe we're ready to conquer many things in our life. Are we excited? It's going to be a good series as we walk through. Open up your Bibles to Joshua chapter 1. And we're going to dig right in. Chapter 1, verse 1, it says this. After the death of Moses, the servant of the Lord, it came to pass that the Lord spoke to Joshua, the son of Nun, Moses' assistant, saying this. Moses, my servant, is dead. Now therefore arise, go over this Jordan, you and all this people, to the land which I am giving to them, the children of Israel. So right at the gate we realize Moses is dead. Here's the interesting thing about this, is when people move on and they head home to be in glory with the Lord, the work continues. The work continues. And so it's amazing because God raises up more and more people. And so the interesting is we should be asking ourselves, Lord, am I one of those the people that you want to raise up to continue to spread the gospel and to continue to love on the people that you've surrounded me with? Am I that person? Yes. I believe every single person that says yes to Jesus are these people that are saying, yes, we declare who you are, Lord. And it doesn't matter what age, it doesn't matter where you are in your season of life, you can be used for the glory of God. We want the young to be used for the glory of God. We want the old to be used for the glory of God. We want everyone to be used for the glory of God because guess what? Everyone's in a different season and you're going to meet someone that's in the same season. And so you can be used to proclaim who he is. You can be used to come alongside someone and walk with them in this journey called life. And so what we see here is, yes, Moses is dead and he did fantastic things and thank you, Lord, for him. But what this is saying is, you know what? Moses, my servant, is dead, but now arise, Joshua, because you are going to be the next leader, and the work has to continue. And I love it because he accepts that and we move forward. So go over this Jordan, you and all these people, to the land which I am giving you to them, the children of Israel. Every place, listen to this, that the sole of your foot will tread upon, I have given you. As I said to Moses. So he declared this to Moses as well, saying the same exact thing, but they didn't listen. From the wilderness and this Lebanon, as far as the great river, the river Euphrates, all the land of the Hittites and the great sea toward the going down of the sun shall be your territory. So he's saying, look, everything that you see, all of these things that I'm referencing right now, it's all yours. And the minute your soul touches them, it's yours. That's a lot of land. That's a lot of responsibility. But what he's saying is, move forward, Joshua. Take these people to the place that I promised them. Please. It's flowing with milk and honey, and every single thing that they need is there. Let's go. Let's move forward. In verse 5, no man shall be able to stand before you all the days of your life. As I was with Moses, so I will be with you. I will never leave you nor forsake you. That is so encouraging. Be strong and of good courage, for to this people you shall divide as an inheritance to the land which I swore to their fathers to give them. Remember, it's a brand new generation that's taking place. Only be strong and very courageous, that you may observe to do according to all the law which Moses my servant commanded to you. Do not turn from it to the right hand or to the left, that you may prosper wherever you go. Listen to all the promises that are taking place. Verse 8, this book of the law shall not depart from your mouth, but you shall meditate in it day and night, that you may observe to do according to all that is written in it. For then you will make your way prosperous. I will make your way prosperous, and then you will have good success. Have I not commanded you? Be strong and of good courage. Do not be afraid, nor be dismayed, for the Lord your God is with you wherever you go. Beautiful text. As he's declaring the promises that are taking place. If you're taking notes this morning, the title is Be Strong and Courageous. Be strong and courageous. And the first thing we see here are the promises. But as I mentioned earlier, the only way we can conquer these things is if we have faith. And so what we need to look at is if we say, hey, we have faith in Jesus, then guess what? We have faith in those promises that he's given us. That has to be a reality in our life. That the promises he's declared, we have faith in that's actually going to take place. Well, God promised Joshua 3 things. And we're going to take a look at it. In verse 3 and 4, he declares this. Every place that your sole of your foot will tread upon, I have given to you. From the wilderness to this Lebanon, as far as the great river and so on, he's saying all of this shall be your territory. He's saying that Israel will enter into the promised land. That's what he's declaring. You guys will enter into the promised land. That is an absolute promise. And everywhere that your soul touches will be yours, wherever it is. Wherever your foot touches, it's yours. This is a huge promise. God already gave the land to them, and now it was their responsibility to step in and actually take it. And how many of us, we know what God has promised us, but for some odd reason, we're not stepping out and actually declaring it and taking it? He's promised so much. And sometimes what it takes is us just taking the leap of faith and stepping into what God has for us. But a lot of times it's so difficult, right? Because we're wandering. We're not sure if that's exactly what God has. We're not sure if we really want to move that direction because of our own heart and our own desires. But we realize God promised these things and he's leading this direction, but I'm not sure I really want to make the first step. And so what he's saying to them is, look, I promise all of these things. Now I need you to be responsible. Take a step in faith and take the promise. It's yours. So he promises those things. But how many of us can say we know that God has already said certain things, but we haven't moved? That's hard. We know that God has declared certain things over our life, but we're just kind of stuck. We don't know what to do. We're not sure we really want to move. Again, why? Fear. Fear settles in. How many times in your life, it's literally you could look back and go, well, that was fear, that was fear, that was fear, that was fear. Because it is fearful to step into the unknown. It is fearful to step out in faith. It is fearful because we don't know what lays on the other side. Anyone agree? I mean, literally in every big decision of your life, I talk to people constantly and they're saying, hey, pray for me on this decision. Pray for me on this decision. Pray for me on this decision. And they're saying, I'm not sure what to do. I don't know if I should go this way, or I'm not sure about this main thing. And a lot of times what we do is we let the enemy in and it causes fears and doubts. When God's right, God's saying, look, I already have you. What did he declare to Josh? Be strong and courageous. Don't be afraid. Why? I am with you. I am with you. And so for us, we need to realize that God has declared promises to us and we have to step through the door and enter into new territory. It has to happen. It has to happen in our lives. And so what I'm saying is let's move forward. In Ephesians chapter 1, verse 3, it says this. All praise to God, the Father of our Lord Jesus Christ, who has blessed us with every spiritual blessing in the heavenly realms because we are united with Christ. What a beautiful promise. He's saying every spiritual blessing is yours. In verse 11, it continues on. Furthermore, because we are united with Christ, we have received an inheritance from God, for he chose us in advance and he makes everything work out according to his plan. A lot of us in this room aren't grabbing a hold of the inheritance that God has given us. Because of fear, because of doubt, because of change, because we don't know what's ahead, because for some reason the enemy is telling us something completely different, going, you don't want to go that way. You know what you want. You know what your desires are. Those aren't his. You should stick to your desires. You should stick to your wants. You should stick to everything that you want in this life. Anyone ever had that battle in their own mind? It happens all the time. And so what he's saying is, I've promised you an inheritance. I've promised you freedom in me. And they were promised the land and we are promised the inheritance. And this is God's house. It's his house. And so it's exciting that we can see the promises that he's laid out before us. So we can actually cling to those promises and cling to what he has for us. So number one, again, he promises that Israel would enter into the promised land. But two, that Israel would have victory over their enemies. In verse 5, he says it. He says, no man shall be able to stand before you all the days of your life. Can you imagine Joshua hearing this for one moment? Josh, listen up. You're going to go enter into the promised land. And then guess what? Everything that your foot touches is yours. And additionally, no one's going to be able to defeat you. Are you hearing me? I'm telling you, I'm here for you. We're going to walk this thing out. We're literally going to walk because that's how we got to get there. We're going to walk there and we're going to be going through some things along the way. But guess what? I'm telling you, no man shall be able to stand before you all the days of your life. What a promise. What a promise. Does that mean there won't be difficulty? Does that mean there won't be hard times? Does that mean that your life will not go the way that you planned? Remember, we got to think about these things. He's not saying everything's going to be perfect. But what he is saying is he will be there always, and he will support him and back him and be there alongside of him the whole entire time during this journey. And so he says that to him. That's a promise that no man will stand against you. You will defeat these enemies. But this means, guess what? That there's going to be war. And sometimes in life, we don't want to be encouraged by that, right? That there's going to be war in our life, that there's going to be chaos, that there's going to be times of great strife, that there's going to be issues in our relationships with people, that we're going to butt heads. How many of you have that friend where you just constantly butting heads with them? Constantly, it's like, man, we don't see eye to eye a lot of times, but I love them and they're my friend. But you have a difficult friend. All right, we got 3 people. 3 people. Thank you for being honest, everyone. You have a difficult friendship, right? Or a difficult relationship. And it doesn't mean, again, that everything's going to be amazing. What he's saying here is you're going to defeat these enemies. So when he's saying defeat, what does that mean? War. He means war. And so in our life, we have to realize that there's going to be times of war spiritually. There's going to be times of chaos emotionally or physically. There's going to be times where life is difficult. That is the reality. And nowhere in the Bible does it say it's going to be easy the minute you give your life to Jesus. Nowhere. But what it does say is be strong, be courageous, don't be afraid. I am with you wherever you go. How many of you are encouraged this morning to hear that? It's amazing that he's with us wherever we go. And so we can cling to that promise and we must cling to it. But life isn't easy and it isn't simple. There will be battles and he says that he won't leave us. And if he's not leaving us, then guess what? We know that we will have victory in our life. We know we could be victorious because of him. I was thinking about this when I was thinking about just our relationship and what God is doing in this book specifically. And God, it's like, okay, Lord, I know you declared this to Joshua, that you'll never leave him and you'll always be with him and in the battles that he's going to face, because we're going to walk through all those battles through this book. And a lot of it is chaos, guys. I'm telling you, there's war in this place. But the point is, it's like I started thinking about my school days back when I was super, super young. And as you guys can see, I'm not very tall. So growing up, I was usually the shortest one in the class. Anyone with me? Shortest one in the class? Thank you. Yes. Yes. Not the only one. I feel good. Thank you. That's encouraging. But I was always the smallest kid in the room. And what I found out very quickly is I was bullied. There's people that made fun of me for being short and all those things. It's all good. I got past it, guys. We're good. The point is, I made friends with every single tall kid in the school. I made friends with all the big kids. Why? So when I'm walking around, guess what? You barely see me because there's tall kids around, right? I made friends with all those people. Why? Because when somebody would say something to me or they would do something to me, who do you think would step up? The big kid. And I saw it as like this amazing vision of the Lord of like, Lord, that's how it feels sometimes. It's like we go through these difficult things and we're in war, we're in these situations, and you're just standing right behind us because you're bigger than anything in this planet. And you're just like, you have nothing to fear, David. I'm right behind you. I'm right beside you. I'm with you. And so it reminded me of just those times of childhood, like, thank you for those awesome big friends that I had that supported me when people were making fun of my shortness. And how amazing they were. But they stepped up as a friend and they're like, don't mess with him. And it's like, Lord, that's you. We're like, you can't touch him. You can't touch her. Guess why? I'm their king. I have their back. An enemy, you can try anything you want, but I declared over them that they're my child. That's mind-blowing. It's mind-blowing. And so it's amazing that we have a God who loves us that much, and he's like, look, I got you, but I need you to move, and I need you to keep moving forward because I got great things ahead, and I got promises that I've already laid out, and I want you to walk into those promises and cling to them. And so it's a beautiful story that we're jumping into. And again, the reality is that if he's not leaving us, then we will have major victory in our life. Romans chapter 8, verse 31 says this, what shall we say about such wonderful things as these? If God is for us, who can be against us? Sometimes we just need to hear that verse over and over and over and over again. Because the reality is, it's so true that he's for us. And if he's for us, who could be against us? That means that any battles that you're going to face in the near future, because guess what? We don't even know what lunch we're having today. We don't know what tomorrow looks like. We don't know if there's a battle ahead in 24 hours. But what he's saying is, I'm for you. And guess what? Nothing can be against you, because that's how powerful God is. And so we can move forward in anything in our life knowing that we can have victory over those things. And so he says this, that Israel will enter into the promised land, that Israel will have victory over their enemies. And thirdly, he says that he will divide the land as an inheritance for the conquering tribes. What he's giving them truly in these first 6 verses that we read is the whole entire book of Joshua. It's literally the whole entire book. The first part we're going to see here is them entering into the promised land. And then the next part we're going to see is them defeating and having victory over their enemies. And then the last part is them dividing the land that they have taken over, dividing it between the tribes of Israel. And so he's giving us a clear picture of what's ahead. But here's what's interesting about this. This not only sealed the promise and victory over the enemy, but and explains that he's going to divide these things. But what happens is he's actually saying, hey, Joshua, this is the next stages of your life. This is what's actually going to happen. But how many of us can see the direction God has, but we don't trust the direction that God has? Because this is where the rubber meets the road a lot of times. Is he's declaring to Joshua, hey, Joshua, I have direction for you, right? This is what's going to take place. And he literally says it. This is what's going to happen. So it's like, here's the rest of your life. How many of us would be like, yes, that's what I want to hear right now. Give me every single thing. He gives direction, but a lot of times he doesn't give detail. How many of us want detail? He gives direction. Hey, David, go to Utah. Why? Why? And he goes, just listen to my direction. But I'm like, Lord, I want details. I need details in my life. I need to know what's happening tomorrow, next week, next month, next year. I need to know if I'm going to continue having kids, huh, Katie, or not. Give me some detail. But the reality is, God's like, if I give you detail, David, how much faith are you going to have? Sometimes the point is he doesn't give detail so we can walk in faith. How easy would it be if there's detail in every movement that we make? It'd be like, yeah, of course I have faith. I know what's going to happen. But how about on the opposite end? I don't know what's going to happen, but I'm still going to move in faith. That's the way our heart should be. As we realize there's not many details in our life, but we know that God has given us direction. And so he gives that direction to Joshua, but he doesn't give detail. He promises him, and he gives a command. If we look at verse 9 again, he says, have I not commanded you? I love this because it's not just, hey, I'm going to say these things. He says, I've commanded you to do this. Commanded you to be strong, be of good courage, be courageous. Do not be afraid, for the Lord your God is with you wherever you go. He commanded it to him. So for us, it's so difficult. We hear these things and we go, wait, this is an amazing verse, right? But we have to look at the first part of the verse and what it says. I've commanded you to do this, to be strong, be courageous, for I am with you wherever you go. It's a command. And so for us, when we hear this, maybe you're in a place in your life right now where it's like, this is so difficult to even think about. It's so difficult because I'm in the desert or I'm in the wilderness just wandering. He's commanded you to be strong and be courageous. And so we can't be courageous if we're stuck over here in the box. How are we going to move and take new territory for the Lord? How are we going to move and accept the promises he's given us if we're stuck in the box? If we're stuck over here in the corner where he's saying it's over there? So what he's saying is be strong and courageous. That means get outside the box, people. We see it? Get outside the box, move towards the direction that God has. And guess what? There might not be many details, but he's with you. Move and be courageous and take new territory for the Lord.
Amen. Amen.
He declares it to him loudly and clearly. Be strong, be courageous, don't be afraid, I am with you. This is the promise Joshua will hold on to the whole entire time. What promises are you holding on to this morning? We need to think about those things. Because as life has struggles and difficulties, it's in those times you need to remind yourself, what has God promised me? Again, God lays out the whole story of his life, but he doesn't give every single detail. He just says, be strong, Josh. Just be strong. I got this for you. But we need to be courageous because there's things ahead. And the truth is, we won't ever know those details. And the truth is, it won't ever always be perfect, right? But God is saying here, have faith and cling to my promises. And here's reality, right? When we think about God, don't worry, you guys are going to see my strength. Oh, totally joking. Here's what's happening, right? This pillar here. See, this is like my friends in the time. Here's the reality, right? The Bible speaks so many times as God is our stronghold, right? God's our pillar, right? He's our rock. He's something that we can hold on to. And that's what these represent in our life is this is that pillar and we need to cling to it. But a lot of times, as I was mentioning before, we're over here just wandering around like, God, what do you have for me? Or I don't really want to do what you told me to do because I'd rather just be wandering. Because here's reality again. Sometimes we want to wander and then we want to say, poor me. Too harsh? Poor me. Look at me over here. When God is saying, do you not see the pillar? Do you not see the stronghold? Do you not see the rock? I'm literally screaming at you, David, 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 listen to me. And so what we need to do is instead of wandering, we just need to walk over and cling to the promises. And once we get a hold of him, guess what? He's our rock. He's our pillar. He's every single thing that we need. And so he's the one that's guiding us through the life. He's the one guiding us into the direction that we need to go. And so what happens again is we need to just cling to this thing, grab a hold of it and go, let's go for the ride. Because guess what? It's going to be fun. It's going to be hard. It's going to be difficult, but it's going to be fun. Because when you're running alongside the Lord and his people, there is so much that God shows us. There's so much blessings that come with it. There's so many times in our life where it is, destruction in those things, but we have a family that we can cling on to. We have a family that we can get a hold of, and we say, thank you for walking me through this. I got to meet a guy yesterday. His name is Patrick. He's a friend of you guys that live next door to you. And we were there. Noah got to hang out with his friend Sam and stay the night. And so we went to go pick him up. And there's this guy outside. And he looked awesome. He was super cool, had glasses and a beard, not saying anything, but he had glasses and a beard. He was awesome. And he had this shirt that said this, "World's Okayest Dad." And I was like, that's amazing, because that's how I feel a lot of the times. And then I said, a couple of my good friends gave me a shirt that says "World's Okayest Pastor." But and that's how I started the conversation with Patrick. I was like, I have a shirt like that, but it says "World's Okayest Pastor." And he starts laughing. I was like, yeah, I don't think I'll ever wear that on a Sunday, because I'm going to give mixed signals here. But it started this unique conversation. And I started talking to him, and I just asked him about his life. My wife is literally like, we need to go. And I started a real deep conversation with Patrick. And she's sitting over there with Tanya hanging out, and I'm just like hearing about Patrick's life. But he opens up his whole entire life to me, where he's from, Michigan, and how he moved to California for a bit. Then he moved here not that long ago, I think 8 months ago, maybe 9 months ago. Then he shares some specific details that took place in his life. And I won't share all those things, just the sake of it is that's his story to tell. But it's some hardships that him and his wife fell on. And as he's saying all these things to me, I'm like, dude, I'm so sorry. I'm so sorry. I'm just hearing his story. But it was amazing, because he's like, you know what? I don't know why, he's like, we just ended up here. But he's like, the greatest thing was that we ended up here at the time we did, because if we didn't end up here at the time we did, we wouldn't have had the support that we had during that time. And I'm just thinking in my mind, that's God's direction. That's God's direction. And so we just started talking about life and all these things that happen in life, right? And the difficulties we face. But he's like, you know what? It was amazing to go through because of the support we had. And we walked out of it well. And I'm like, that's awesome, man. And I made a new friend. I love making new friends. He's a really cool guy, and I hope one day he shows up. But he was super cool, and it was awesome just to hear his story. But it got me thinking that, Lord, what a blessing it was that you directed his family to this place. And then during probably their worst time they've ever been to in their life, you had people that surrounded them and supported them and walked with them. That's the church, guys. That's the church. That's what we should be doing, taking care of people like that. And when we see someone struggling, when we see someone having a difficult time, but we just wrap our arms around them and say, look, I'm going to help you through this, but additionally, cling to the promises that God has given you. Cling to them in those times. Grab a hold of them. He's your strong tower. He will be here for you. He'll walk with you. And so that's what we need to do. And so when we take a look at these things, I know that sometimes it's hard, because in the wandering, in the place where we're wandering over here, right? It feels safe sometimes to step backwards, or it feels safe to stay in this area, because guess what? It's comfortable. How many of you can say comfortability, being comfortable, is probably the best thing that you want in your life? You want to be comfortable, right? And so in those areas in our life, we know that this is kind of my comfort zone, and I'm going to stay here. And so what God is saying is like, you got to move outside your comfort zone. You got to move. Because we aren't moving ahead into the promised land unless you move out of the comfort zone. And so what he's saying is, stop staying here. Don't stay here. Don't stay in that specific spot, because staying is safe. We get it. But in reality, moving is faith. And so we need to move forward instead of staying backwards. John Blankard says this: when Abraham went out, he was not sure of his destination, but he was sure of his company. I love that. Because how many times in our life, we're not sure of the destination, right? We might know the direction. We're not sure of the destination. It's not like we can just pull up Apple Maps and know, okay, God's saying this area, I'm going to go. That doesn't happen a lot of times. And so what he's saying is, look, yes, I know the destination, or I know where I'm headed, or maybe the direction, but I may not know of those things, but I'm sure of the company that's going to be with me. And how many of you are encouraged to hear that you have company along the ride? So Joshua, as God is declaring these things over his life, he's saying, you have to trust me. You have to put your faith in me. You have to show these people that they can trust me as well. And in verse 10, we'll continue on here. It says this, and Joshua commanded the officers of the people, saying, pass through the camp and command the people, saying, prepare provisions for yourselves. For within 3 days you will cross over this Jordan to go into to possess the land which the Lord your God has given to you to possess. And to the Reubenites and the Gadites and half of the tribe of Manasseh, Joshua spoke, saying this, remember the word which Moses, the servant of the Lord, commanded you, saying, the Lord your God is giving you rest and is giving you this land. Your wives, your little ones, and your livestock shall remain in the land which Moses gave you on this side of the Jordan, but you shall pass before your brethren armed, all your mighty men of valor, and help them. Until the Lord has given your brethren rest as he gave you, and they also have taken possession of the land which the Lord God had given them. Then you shall return to the land of your possession and enjoy it, which Moses, the Lord's servant, gave you on this side of the Jordan toward the sunrise. So they answered Joshua, saying this, all that you command us we will do, and wherever you send us we will go. Just as we heeded Moses in all things, so we will heed you. Only the Lord your God will be with you, as he was with Moses. Whoever rebels against your command and does not heed your words, in all that you command him, he shall be put to death. Only be strong and of good courage. So we see a huge faith part of this is God's declaring the promises. But again, it takes faith to see those promises as reality and cling on to them. And then at the end of the chapter, he's saying, look, this is the encouragement. That we need to encourage one another to trust God in those things. So he encourages God's people. He says to them, he points them to the promises. He says, don't you remember what Moses said and talked about? That promise in verse 13 is this. Remember the word which Moses, the servant of the Lord, commanded you, saying, the Lord your God is giving you rest and is giving you this land. So he points them to the promise. Do you not remember? God said, this is yours. Trust him in it. And let's move forward. He's going to give you rest in this land. What a great leader as he's encouraging them and pointing them to, guess what? Not himself. He's pointing them to God. He's pointing them straight to the Lord, saying, he's the one that declared these things. I'm going to point you to him. It's not him that he's focused about. It's Jesus. In 1 Corinthians chapter 10, verse 31, the second half of this verse says this, whatever you do, do it for the glory of God. And that's the truth. And that's Joshua's heart in this. He's saying, look, I'm here. God put me in this position to bring all glory and praise to his name. That's it. And so the best thing I can do as a leader is what he's saying is point you towards him. Is remind you of the promises that he's given. And remind you to cling to those promises that he has for you. Then in response, they encourage their leader. What they're saying is we're going to link arms and we're going to push forward together. And this is so important because it's not about Joshua. It's not about him. And for us, we need to hear that it's not about just us. Because I believe this. Ask yourself this question. How are we going to stop wandering and start conquering? In reality, how does that look like in your life? How do we stop wandering in those areas and we start conquering in those areas? I believe this. Together. You hear me, church? Together. The way that we are able to conquer these things is together. And that's what they're declaring is, look, we know Joshua, we know that God has declared these things and we see it. So we want to link arms with you and we want to push forward together because we can't conquer this land. But guess what? It's going to take all of us to do it. It's not going to just take Joshua. So for you this morning, maybe those areas that you think that you're alone or you're just stressed out in the areas in your life, I want you to hear this, that you don't have to do it alone. You don't. The enemy sometimes tells us that that's what needs to happen, that it needs to be alone, that no one cares, that no one's for you, that no one wants to walk with you, that no one wants to say hi to you, no one wants to sit with you, whatever it is. And it's wrong. The enemy is wrong. There's so many people, even in this church, that want to walk with you, that want to link arms with you and saying, let's push forward. There's new territory ahead. There's promises that God's declared. But we need to cling to those things and we need to grab a hold of them. Joshua's heart is truly amazing as he's saying, look, to all the people, we're going to do this, but we're going to do it together. And they link arms with him. They say, yes, let's do this. But the first step in us conquering, I believe, is having faith in who Jesus is and then trusting him with all that we have. We have to. It's the only way that we'll be able to step forward. When I was 18 years old, me and my wife just got married, and I was in a different place in my life, completely different. And I was doing just different things in the music industry, and I felt like every night God was just speaking to me and speaking to me and speaking to me, and I never heard him like that before. Has anyone been there? I grew up in church, I grew up playing worship and all those things, and then I fell away because it was about my parents' faith, not my own. And so when reality hit of like being an adult and taking responsibility, that heaviness and that weight, anyone feel that? We're like, yeah, this is real now. And now I gotta make some real good decisions that's ahead. And so what I heard was the Lord speaking to me and speaking to me. And the one thing he kept saying to me was, again, just the destination. He said, Utah. And the whole time I fought him and fought him and fought him. My wife can raise her hand and be like, yes, he did, because I was the one out here, and he was fighting it the whole time. But I was fighting him and fighting him and fighting him on. And guess what? I was wandering, completely wandering, knowing that God had promises, and he was saying, look, go to Utah, I have something greater. But I'm going like, no. I'll just keep wandering. But the minute I finally came to the conclusion that I should do what God has called me to do and listen, despite the details, despite what was next, despite what was ahead, he said one thing clear: move. And for us, I hope that you're hearing something from the Lord, and maybe it is just that, just move. My encouragement to you this morning is move forward. Because just like where I was, I didn't want to move at all. But the minute I took that first step towards the promised land that God had for me and my wife and our family, was the minute that so many radical things started to take place. Was it easy? No way. Was it difficult and hard and bitterness stepped in? Yes, many times. But I just started to move. And when we moved, finally, the Lord started revealing different things in our life, and it was magical. It's the only word I could say. It was a blessing. It was amazing to see as he started truly just ripping my heart out, chipping away at it, and removing all the sin that was inside of me. And though it was hard and it hurt, it was the best thing we could have ever done in our life. I heard from so many people at that time that God had a plan, he had a purpose for my life, but I didn't get it or understand how that could even be possible. How can God even use us? But you this morning, I want to say this, that he does have a plan and a purpose for your life. We hear it sometimes, we're going, that sounds cliche. It's the truth that he does. And he wants to use you in mighty ways, just like Joshua. When he said to him, I believe he's saying to us, be strong, be courageous. Don't be afraid. He is with you wherever you go. Cling to that promise this week, church. He's that good. And guess what? He's faithful. He's going to complete the work. And he just wants you to step forward in those promises, and let's do big things for the kingdom of God. Amen? Let's stand and let's worship this morning.